You are stuck in the belly of a ruined world, enveloped in pitch darkness and suffocating frost. Long before the Germans ever fire a shell at your sector, this cellar tortures you in its own right. It is the basement of a four-story brick apartment building on January 9th Square in Stalingrad, a shattered, sub-zero tomb carved out of red brick and frozen earth. You were chosen for one simple, brutal reality. Your unit was tossed into the Volga River crossing at midnight, and you are one of the few survivors small and agile enough to squeeze through the rubble-choked cellar grates to fortify this ground. Tonight, the brutal Russian winter drops the temperature to 30 degrees below zero, freezing the moisture inside your nostrils. Squeezed into the narrow cellar alcove, your shoulders press so tightly against the frozen brickwork that you can distinctly hear the rapid, shallow breath of Nikolai, the soldier standing beside you in the dark. The air down here is a nauseating brew of damp soot, rotting cabbage, unburied corpses trapped beneath the upper floors, and a lingering metallic stench of burnt cordite that clings to the back of your throat, refusing to dissipate. You clutch your bolt-action Mosin-Nagant rifle against your chest. The ice-cold steel bites through your worn wool gloves, and everything around you feels bone-chillingly oppressive. The time is 3 a.m. on November 12th, 1942. You are 5 feet beneath the street level of a dead city, at the edge of a vast, invisible subterranean slaughterhouse. Beside you in the gloom stands Nikolai. You've known him for 8 months now, long enough to read his mood simply by the posture of his stooped shoulders, long enough that even silence between you carries a shared language. At this moment, as he hunkers down against a pile of broken plaster, he whispers an old Orthodox prayer under his breath, his voice neither low nor hurried, just praying with quiet composure into the dark. You suddenly realize the faith in your own heart has long since faded. You can't bring yourself to speak as openly as he does. So you stay silent. The darkness wraps tightly around everyone as the icy wind howls through the artillery-blown vents above. Tucked inside your heavy padded jacket pocket is a letter written at the staging camp in Kuibyshev, sealed long ago. Back then, you were secretly convinced this letter would never need to be sent. It's addressed to your mother in Sverdlovsk, containing only 2 lines, "Don't worry about me. I'll be just fine." At the pre-battle briefing across the river, the political commissar had laid out the operational plan with methodical clarity. Pavlov's house was a critical strategic bastion commanding a 200-meter line of sight to the riverbank. Soviet Katyusha rocket launchers and heavy artillery from the eastern bank of the Volga would obliterate the German 305th Infantry Division's staging lines. Supply barges would cross the river every night with fresh ammunition, hot food, and reinforcements. By the time your squad secured the basement, German combat capability in this sector was expected to be cut by 70%. According to the plan, a counteroffensive would link up with your position within 3 days. The commissar's tone had been as flat as if he were reading a train timetable, as though the tactical blueprint and the reality beneath the falling snow would match down to the millimeter. In the dark of the staging trench, Nikolai had turned to look at you, asking if the defense would truly go as smoothly as planned. You replied, "It will." When you said those words, you genuinely believed it. That belief was the final piece of pure conviction you would carry into this cellar. At 6:45 a.m., the first German artillery barrage strikes the building. The 4-story brick structure above you groans like a dying beast, showering the basement with a thick rain of red dust, plaster, and shattered mortar. The Germans launched their assault far earlier than anticipated. Through the cellar embrasures, you see infantry in field gray coats advancing behind the clanking treads of Panzer IV tanks. You scramble forward to your firing position with everything you have. The sounds around you are entirely different from what you had imagined. No heroic speeches or booming anthem, only the deafening, mechanical roar of tank engines and the sharp, relentless chatter of MG-42 machine guns sweeping the square overhead. Shells smash into the upper floors with heavy, muffled thuds that shock your spine. The overlapping layers of noise mesh into a disorienting haze, impossible to pinpoint, settling like a crushing weight right between your brows. You have no time to think. You just rack the bolt of your rifle and fire. The very first sight that greets you through your scope makes your heart sink. The artillery across the river hasn't suppressed the enemy at all. Blinding snowstorms and Luftwaffe air superiority have forced the Soviet batteries into silence. The coastal bluffs across the square stand completely intact, pockmarked with pitch-black rubble heaps spewing endless tongues of machine gun fire. German machine guns fire at 1,200 rounds per minute. Under a hail like this, they don't even need to aim at individual men. The snow in the square around your building turns crimson, patch by patch. You deliberately avert your eyes from the bleeding forms of your comrades sprawling across the frozen cobbles, burying your head as you press tight against the cellar wall. Firing, cycling the bolt, reloading with freezing fingers, then firing again. German infantry surge into the ground floor above you, and combat breaks down into what the officers call Rattenkrieg, the War of the Rats. Soldiers drop one after another in every posture imaginable. Some shot through cellar windows, some collapsing from grenade, shrapnel bouncing off the ceiling, others crushed under falling masonry. You throw yourself against a thick brick pillar, pressing tight against the cold surface for 10 full seconds while submachine gun fire tears the plaster above your head. Taking 3 deep breaths, you look down and realize your Mosin-Nagant is still gripped tightly in your hands. You have no memory of working the bolt to chamber a fresh round. Muscle memory had readied the weapon without a thought. 50 yards across the courtyard lies the secondary wing of the complex. Between here and there is nothing but open, snow-covered rubble under an open, defenseless sky. Entrenched on the upper floors of the surrounding ruins, German snipers sweep the entire perimeter with a 360-degree field of fire. The original operational plan is completely shattered. All that remains before your eyes is this stretch of fatal cellar. And in the chaos, you realize a single truth. Stopping is far more dangerous than pushing forward. You keep fighting, not out of bravado, but because behind you lies only the icy Volga River and fallen comrades. Only holding this basement lies a chance at survival. Hunching your back, you crawl along a narrow trench dug through the cellar floor, falling twice as debris knocks your helmet loose, never once looking back. The inner basement vault is a reinforced brick chamber roughly 5 feet high. You slump against it, your cheek pressed to its rough, freezing surface. 15 soldiers are huddled here, representing at least 4 different shattered platoons, with not a senior officer in sight. A sergeant named Yakov Pavlov steps up. You've never met him before. He belongs to another regiment, his collar spattered with dried blood, though whether it's the enemy's or his own is impossible to tell. Without waiting for higher orders, he immediately sets to organizing the defense. His voice is steady and clear. He clearly understands that panic means immediate death. Nikolai made it into this room alive too, his Ushanka hat missing, his sleeve stained dark red. He speaks up, assuring you it isn't his own blood. You don't ask where it came from. To hold the building, every stairwell and floor breach must be wired with mines and cleared room by room. The heavy artillery support meant for your defense is nowhere to be seen. The supply barges across the Volga were shelled and sunk beneath the icy currents. Now, there's only Pavlov, you, Nikolai, and 13 other soldiers facing an entire German division and its armor. Holding this house is a different kind of brutal compared to the chaos in the open square. The square demanded speed and raw guts, defending the cellar test sheer endurance, nerve, and brutal close-quarters violence. Inch by inch, the men haul anti-tank rifles up narrow wooden ladders, keeping low to stay out of the enemy's line of sight through floor cracks. You advance along a collapsed drainage tunnel in the cellar floor, a route Pavlov had spotted on a building blueprint 2 hours ago. Every inch gained feels bought with everything you have. By the time you clear the first German breach at the stairwell, the room is littered with spent shell casings. The surviving attackers have fallen back to the courtyard. You step onto the shattered landing and look out through a shell hole. The entire square unfolds below. Burnt-out panzer hulls lie smoking in the snow, abandoned equipment, and motionless, frozen bodies, the white expanse. You force yourself to look away. The thin barricade that gave you cover moments ago looks pitifully small from up here. Shell casings lie 6 inches deep on the concrete floor, and the barrel of your submachine gun still retains a scorching heat. Until now, you thought you were merely fighting a tactical battle for a building. Standing here, the truth strikes you with cold clarity. Everyone is just a piece on a high-command warboard in Moscow and Berlin. The essence of this battle was a gamble on how many men could be fed into this meat grinder to buy time. Pavlov leads a small squad to clear the adjacent cellar wing. A mile-long network of basements connects to a ruined bakery at the edge of the square, a suspected German forward observation post. He dispatches you and Nikolai to clear the connecting storage room. You shoulder open the heavy oak door and rush inside, weapon raised. There are no German soldiers inside, but it is far from empty. An elderly woman crouches beneath a heavy cast-iron stove in the corner, hiding 2 young children beside her. There is not a trace of gratitude on their faces. Their eyes are like those of trapped animals, their bodies frozen as they stare at you, terror wiping away all expression. One of the children sobs silently, throat choked, unable to utter a sound in the freezing gloom. For months, they have lived under relentless aerial bombardment, and now their liberators have burst in with bayonets fixed, yet the only sound filling their ears is still the ruthless roar of war. You're left speechless. Your training taught you to view every room as a tactical position, yet here are innocent civilians trapped right in its heart, looking at your soot-caked face and drawn rifle with sheer terror. You slowly lower your barrel, step back into the corridor, and report to Pavlov. Clear. As you speak those words, a heavy mix of emotions churns inside, but you push it down and keep moving. In a war zone, you have no other choice. By mid-afternoon, your squad links up with remnants of the 13th Guards Division holding an adjacent cellar. The combat breaks down into quick, brutal skirmishes, throwing grenades around blind brick corners, clearing one dark cellar only to defend the next. For 3 days and nights, you and Nikolai barely exchange a word, yet you remain side by side. No words are needed. An unspoken understanding has long existed between you. At the intersection of 2 flooded cellar passages, a burst of gunfire erupts from a breach in the brickwork. The shooting lasts only 2 seconds, but Nikolai collapses. A stray bullet has struck his upper thigh. A combat medic crouches beside him within 3 minutes. After inspecting the wound in the dim light of an oil lamp, the medic says he's lucky, missed the femoral artery by less than an inch. He's going to make it. We're hauling him across the Volga on the night boat. You stand by, watching the medic tie a tight tourniquet around his leg, your mind completely numb. Seeing this friend of 8 months lying bleeding on the frozen mud of Stalingrad, you feel not even a ripple of emotion. This isn't temporary shock, but a cold indifference that has seeped into your very marrow. Listening to the medic, you simply nod, check the magazine of your weapon, wipe the black soot from your face, and move back to your firing portal. In this exact moment, you have completely changed. This realization didn't come during the artillery bombardment or inside the dark drainage pipe, but right here, standing over the wounded Nikolai in a moment of utter void. The person who stood on the riverbank days ago, stubbornly believing we will all be fine, was left behind in that frozen red dust forever, never to return. You can never find your former self again. By 9 p.m., your small garrison has resecured the perimeter of Pavlov's house. The gunfire outside has thinned out into sporadic, intermittent sniper shots, like a massive machine slowly grinding to a halt in the deep freeze. You chew on a piece of rock-hard, frozen bread ration, tasting nothing, cleaning the soot and grit from your rifle bolt in the dark by touch alone. Pavlov walks over to your position, pauses in silence for a moment, and asks softly, "You holding up all right, comrade?" You reply, "I'm fine." He gives you a long look, nods, and asks no further questions. This is the tacit understanding of war. Someone is willing to offer comfort, yet you choose to lean against a high, icy wall. Some burdens are too heavy for words. it's better to carry them alone. You find a spot against the frozen brickwork and sit down, pulling out the letter from your chest pocket. The letter sealed in Queebishef and carried close to your heart through the fire, never to be mailed. You stare at the sweat-stained, soot-blackened envelope for a moment before slipping it back into your pocket. There's no need to send it now. You survived the day. The building held. The objective was secured. Historians will later call this house a fortress that cost the enemy more casualties than the entire fall of Paris, a judgment devoid of any falsehood. You try to picture your mother's house in Sverdlovsk. The small wooden table by the window, the icon hanging in the corner, the memory of your father sitting on the porch. Every detail remains crystal clear. Yet the face of the boy who was supposed to return home, eagerly awaited by his family, has grown blurred and unrecognizable. What keeps flashing in your mind are the dark embrasures of the cellar, the silently weeping children beneath the stove, and Nikolai lying bleeding on the frozen mud. Eventually, the war ended, and you returned home to lead a quiet life in Sverdlovsk, a life like your parents, the very life they had worked so hard hoping to give you. When your children asked about your time in the war, you simply said, "I serve in the infantry near the Volga back then." That answer was enough to satisfy them. Children always fill in the blanks with glory and legend, imagining the glowing, fearless heroes carved into stone monuments on Mamayev Kurgan. You let them hold on to those fantasies. Explaining the truth of the cellar was far too difficult. You could never tell them that the young man who stepped onto that boat crossing the Volga and the man who returned home after the war were two entirely different people. It wasn't the winter or the artillery that stole your former self. It was that in those narrow meters of life and death struggle beneath the ruins, that pure, hopeful boy couldn't follow you all the way out of the dark. 40 years later, you passed away quietly in your sleep. In a wooden box in the back of a wardrobe, your daughter found a sealed, yellowed envelope addressed to her grandmother. Opening it with gentle hands, she read the same 2 lines written all those years ago. "Don't worry about me. I'll be just fine." Most veterans who defended the cellars of Stalingrad rarely spoke of those days. It was not because they had nothing to say, but because the world only wanted to see sanitized, romanticized heroics etched into grand stone memorials. Yet the pain, the frost, and the crushing darkness they carried in their hearts could never fit into such polished narratives.